Hi, I'm Alydia Rackham and welcome to this week's novel writing tutorial. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the writing style that you're going to use in your novel, which is very important. I'm individually developed, so sometimes, of course there's going to be things that you decide when you create your style, how you're going to make things feel. But there are a few guidelines that you need to keep in mind in modern writing nowadays, what people expect from writing and how their minds work and how they get into stories. So, here they are. First of all, you need to determine what point of view you're going to be using in your story. If you're going to use first person, third person, nobody uses second person unless they're doing a choose your own adventure. So first person is I did this, I did that. The Hunger Games are written like that. Third person is he did that, she did that. And there's obviously first person is very limited. You spend the entire story inside of one person's head. So you only see what they see, feel what they feel, and only travel where they are, and the only way that he or she finds out what's going on with other people is by talking with them. Sometimes you can switch in chapters, like when I wrote the fan fiction What the Room Requires, I had some in Hermione's head and some in Draco's head, and they were both first person. But then with third person, there's a few more variations. Third person, very limited. And then you have third person omniscient. The narrator, you, knows what's going on in everyone's heads and tells you. I don't advise that because third person omniscient of everything is a great tension killer. For example, I'm going to use Jane Austen again. If I know everything that Mr. Darcy is thinking and everything that Elizabeth is thinking, well, we just gave it all away. The mystery in a love story a lot of times is, what does this other person think? If you're going to change perspectives like that, like if you'd like to tell the story from different people's point of view, varying by chapter, then you need to limit yourself in each chapter to just seeing through their eyes and try not to do too much introspective expounding upon their thoughts. Choosing the point of view is tricky. If you do the wrong point of view, it won't work. And sometimes a story needs to be more intimate, so it needs to be first person. I know that some people don't like first person for some reason, but they should, because that's what the author decided was best. If, for example, with the Hunger Games, if we took an omniscient point of view, Katniss, especially in Catching Fire, all the tension would be killed because we would all know that this was not a real Hunger Games, that there was a coup going on in the background, that there was an extra plan to rescue them at the end, and all that jazz, and it would have ruined it. We have to be with Katniss in her head with her preconceptions about what's going on in order for the twist at the end to be exciting. So yeah, first person is very intimate, and you can get away with telling a lot of the thoughts of this person if you want to, because you're obviously not telling any thoughts of other people. And so the character is still in suspense concerning their true love, their father, or what's going to happen next, because it's just inside themselves. You're just living inside that person. If you're going to be doing third person limited, you can still follow one person around. That's fine. The reader is watching their reactions and guessing for themselves, so it's even more tense. If you're wanting to show multiple points of view, do it chapter by chapter. Switch points of view at the chapter break. Do not do what I call head hopping. in a chapter or a scene. Oh, I mean, if you decide to switch points of view, like in a section, like here it starts with the girl and you write a whole section in that, and then you switch sections and now it's a guy, that's fine. But don't do it in the middle of the same scene. I will stop reading stuff that's written like that. That's amateurish. Okay? Don't do that. You find that on fanfiction.net with goobers who don't know how to write. So that's the mark of someone who's clueless. So don't do that. It kills the tension. It just kills it. So avoid that at all costs, unless you want people like me to put your stuff down right now. And it doesn't matter how good the premise is or whatever. It's annoying as heck to me, and I'll put the book down. So don't do it. Don't do it. Another thing you want to avoid when you are writing is stopping the action totally to describe someone. Again, this is not a hard line, because sometimes you want to describe someone who, just makes a stunning entrance. Like, they do it cinematographically. I don't know what the word is. They do it in The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, when you're leading up to seeing Thranduil, because they're so proud of him, and rightly so, because he's just gorgeous. And so they're like sweeping across him. Look at his rings. Look at how he's sitting. Look at his crown. Look. And that's because he's just amazing. So if you have a character like that who's just, they walk in and it's just, well, feel free to stop and use your most lavish, beautiful descriptions that you can. Don't just say he has a orange and yellow coat on. That's dull. Say something like, he was wearing a cape the color of sunrise, which matched the gold of his hair, and the shining leaves on his crown sparkled like the sun off the water. Okay? So do that. Bring it to life. Don't just, list colors and crap like that, because that's boring. If you're going to spend the time to describe that, that's dull. So bring it to life while you describe. If you are doing a third person limited and you're trying to describe your main character, do not ever do it when they're looking in a mirror, unless they're looking at something that's different than what it was yesterday. Like if she looks in the mirror and goes, oh my gosh, my black eye, maybe I can cover it with some makeup and, stuff like that to describe something that's different. But don't have her just look in the mirror and describe herself. Do it in other ways. Like she got out of bed and ran a comb through her long red hair. And to keep the curls from going crazy, she put it up in a tight braid, okay? Or things like, you can have her getting dressed. She cinched her dress around her slender waist. Okay, now we've got an idea. Now we've got a girl with, who's slender with curly, long red hair. That's good. We can go with that. And then later you can have somebody else make a remark about how pretty her green eyes look today. And there you go. Now you've got your mental picture of her. This leads right into the most important part of modern writing, which is show, don't tell. I'm sure you have heard that before. And it goes right in with incorporating action, and description. You mix those two together. You don't say that he was angry. You describe the symptoms of anger. You say that, his face turned hot. Then he clenched his fists and he ground his teeth and so you describe it like that, not he got mad, because that's dull. Again, don't be dull, don't be boring. That's the motto. I'm gonna have that written on my tombstone. Don't be boring. In the old days, again, you could get away with that, with telling just the emotion. But with the advent of the moving picture, people, even readers who don't say that they really like to watch a bunch of stuff, they like to feel like they are watching it rather than just being told it. So they want to be there in the moment, in the present time, breathing with these characters. And the best way to do that is to show them, don't tell them. It's an amateurish thing to do, just to tell. And just lay it out there, because it kind of insults your readers, like they can't put this together, so you have to spoon feed this to them. Your readers are intelligent. Trust them. Challenge them. Make them wonder about things. Don't just bleh, here it all is, because again, no tension. Your job is to make the readers want something to happen and then hide it from them and deny it to them for as long as you possibly can. Make them scream for it to happen before you finally give it to them. Don't ever tell people, oh my gosh, they were in love and then it was boring. Again, you need to hold that off. Don't even say those words. Don't have the characters say those words. Have those words be just like ripped and torn out of them. In the end, don't just split it out, and don't tell your readers that, oh yeah, sure, they're in love with each other. It's just me. No. Tension, secret. It's in your power. It's in your power. Keep it a secret. And you'll have people on the edge of their seat, and that's the point. Another way to not be boring, this is elementary. Don't use passive verbs. I already said something about he was angry. Was is passive. The water was beautiful. The water was cold. The tree was tall. Get rid of was. As many times as you can, get rid of that stupid word unless you just can't avoid it. You literally can't make the sentence without that word. Okay, but do all you can to get rid of was. So even if you want to use the word angry, but if you get rid of the word was, you say things like anger boiled in his stomach and the heat of it pulsed out through his veins to his arms where he clenched his fists. Okay? Better, right? Instead of he was angry. He was angry, just a little thunk, thunk, thunk. You need to make it live. So get rid of that word. And, it forms of like is. Passive things. Make all your sentences, turn them around, and make them into active things. No just lying there. Here's my classic example, okay? The road was lined with trees. Okay. I get the idea, but it's not interesting. So instead, you flip it around and you start with the trees. And you say, trees marched in a stately line down either side of the road. More interesting, right? Do that. Takes a little more thought and more invention. But once you get into the habit of it, then it's not so hard. Okay, and this is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you today, so pay attention. Dialogue. Dialogue can break your story in half. I can't stress this enough. Even if you have pretty descriptions and a neat premise and cool characters and everything else and an awesome story arc and all that jazz, if your characters sound stupid when they talk, it's going to fail. People know what people sound like when they talk. If your little kid is talking like he's 40 years old, or if your romantic lead is swooning all the time when they're talking and using flowery language that they wouldn't use, or if they're too overly affectionate with their families and too open with how they feel, especially to strangers all the time, that's unnatural. Don't do it. The best thing to do is to sit there and read your scene out loud. read it out loud, even record it if you want to, or read it to a friend. And if something sounds stupid when it comes out of your mouth, if it sounds awkward, like, oh, I just said that into the open air. That felt weird. If I was saying that out loud, I wouldn't say that out loud. Then don't do it. Change it. Get rid of it. But your dialogue, above all, needs to be realistic, and it also needs to fit the time period, okay? This bugged me in the second Thor when Loki was dying, and I mean, it's a great scene. I mean, they acted it really well. But Thor says, "It's okay, it's okay." I'm like, "It's okay?" That would have. How would you have felt if Aragorn had suddenly come out and said, "Well, it's okay"? You'd be like, "What? You don't even know that word, okay?" Because it's an American invention, and it's not very old. I think it was invented in 1916 or something, saying okay. So that doesn't fit. And again, like in the previews for this third one, Thor says, "Oh, he's a friend from work." Does Thor even know what work means? Like that he goes to an office? Like, ugh. It's so clunky. It's so clunky, it takes all the majesty out of him and turns him into a buffoon. So you don't want to do that. If you are concerned about colloquialisms or slang, just look it up. It's the internet. Look it up, make sure that they would say that word, or they even knew it. Or like make sure that you are up on the slang of the time. And instead of saying that's cool, they would actually say that's neat. Or shucks. Or something like that if you're an American. And then, oh gosh, the British slangs go all over the place. And make sure that just because you heard it on a movie, sometimes British slang, they're more powerful and more dirty than you think that they are. So before you go throwing them out there in your novel, check on them. Go check, make sure you know what they mean, and whether or not your character would let that fly out of their mouth. So, yes, very important. Don't misuse the slang, and speak your dialogue out loud so that it is realistic, lifelike, and not overly sappy, drappy, silly. Because again, people will put your book down if they think that people are talking like morons. And because they can't relate to them. That's really it. Just like, oh gosh, who talks like this? Alright, that's all for this week. Just make sure to show, don't tell. Read your dialogue out loud. Make your sentences active. Get rid of passive verbs. And don't head hop. And don't slam the brakes on the action in order to describe something, especially if it's not a grand entrance. If you're walking up on a splendid castle, by all means, stop and talk. If an elf king walks into the room and you're just gobsmacked and your jaw hits the floor, go ahead and do that. But as far as other things, don't just go with describing stuff, stopping the action every time. Just keep it flowing and describe it with the action. And you will have a lot more dynamic and interesting story that grabs people and pulls them in. So have fun with that, and I will see you next week.